members of the academic staff, students, to our audience at home and present, good afternoon to you all. Warm welcome to everyone here and to our guests and to our audience online. This is the moment we have been waiting for. 8 long weeks of competition, of rounds, and now we're here. We have 2 finalists, GCFC Great Debater Competition. Who will it be? Do enjoy our introductory video.
Hi, my name is Karen, a third student at Boston College. I'm also the current Student Union Executive Board's president. Now, growing up, I was not a debater, but indeed I was a person who loves to argue. So with that said, I welcome the opportunity to participate in this competition. At my time in this competition, I see myself grown, I see a lot of other persons. I'm very proud of the opportunity. Other things that piques my interest are watching football. I'm a very great lover for track and an aspiring coach and a physical education teacher for the future. Awesome. All right, so is it your first time after participating in activity? Yes, it is. This is a very from class. This is the first. I wonder the ones before it was for coursework. Awesome. That time you would have been selected as the number one candidate for the day during the competition, right? Now let's talk about the preparation. Into match with someone is what's the preparation like? So first the preparation is it's more mental because you have to get yourself mentally ready for against your opponent because you can never take your opponent back. Now the next step is trying to investigate, study, observe, research, find out who's among your opponent. You know their method of delivery, strategies that they utilize and try to combat how we think they would already, as well as finding the necessary resources, doing adequate research to sustain your arguments. What was your most challenging experience during? So my most challenging experience during this competition, indeed, when I faced, I think it was Nathaniel Rodney, because I actually thought I lost that. You know, she came up with a lot of arguments, but I stuck to the task and I came up victorious. Alright, so what's your preparation for the Alright, so this competitor, it is means a lot to me to be able to compete with Zayn for the second time, actually, because one time already. So, Zayn, I've seen him grow through the competition. I respect his growth through the competition. I intend to come up victorious for the next battle, doing my first thing I said, this is very awesome, and I realized it. Because like I said, it allows persons as a researcher, and also I have the opportunity to see persons like Colleen Young, Nathaniel Racking, Zane Watson himself, and I don't know what's going through the competition, so I don't know the initiative. Alright, so looking forward to the finals, wishing you all the best. Yeah, thank you for having me. Seriously, the bachelor of education program. My hobbies are watching football, playing on a football team. My sports are football and boxing, and this is my first time at the American contest, and see exactly where it goes. I was in it's been quite the experience. I've seen that my research skills has definitely improved. My critical thinking skills has also improved. I've become a more social person. I'm not going to say my social skills. I say my most challenging experience in the competition was my last year versus Canada. The move was a very complicated one because, as you know, as a sports manager, my job in that particular debate was to argue that athletes at the college level should not be paid. So prior to the debate, I actually felt that they should. So it was tough, but I mean, I guess the whole point of the debate is your ability to make a strong argument for what stands you choose. So definitely, I think the debate society. For the literacy courses that we have, I think the debate society will help students. It's all about better reasons, so why not? Why not? Um, what other advice today to someone who is afraid of stating their food? I say start. Once I start, you'll be surprised at how easy it becomes.
Good evening, everyone. I just would like to I just would like to invite our debaters, Mr. Zane Watson and Mr. Karen Salmon, up here with me. They have come this far, the last two in this finale. Gentlemen, up here. So today, we have these two lovely gentlemen going head to head for a prize. So our prizes today will be that the champion, our main prizes will be that the champion will receive a day pass for two at the Mystic Mountain, inclusive of lunch and all rides. Our second place debater will receive a day pass for two at the Hotel Rio in Ocho Rios. And our third place winner will receive a meal for two at the Tracks and Records restaurant. Just before we get into our debate, though, I would just like to thank our sponsors, because without them, we may not have been able to do it on this scale. Our sponsors include O'Mealy's Electrical Corporation, Meritson Distributors, CAG Multimedia Productions, Rio Hotel, courtesy of Mrs. Thompson, the Office of the Vice Principals, members of the academic staff, and Mr. Gale, who has been providing us with technical support. So just before we get into our debate, gentlemen, here are the rules. You will have 10 minutes to deliver your stance each. You both will have 4 minutes to prepare your rebuttal and 4 minutes for the delivery of such rebuttal. Each speaker has the opportunity to use a nugget. They will be able to call on one individual from the audience to assist them with their rebuttal. So, gentlemen, are you ready? Okay. So our moot for today is transgender athletes should not be allowed to compete in the Olympics. We have Mr. Zane Watson, who will be our affirmative, and Mr. Karan Salmon, who will be the opposition today. Gentlemen, your time.
A pleasant good afternoon, my fellow custodians, judges, and my very worthy opponent. It is with great pleasure that I stand before you today, yet again, sharpened and ready. All right. A pleasant good afternoon, my fellow custodians, judges, and my very worthy opponent. It is with great pleasure that I stand before you guys yet again, sharpened and ready for another intellectual battle. The mood for today's debate is one that has sparked some very heated and interesting debates over the past few years, and is still one of the most heavily debated topics in the sports world to this day. The mood states that trans athletes should not be allowed to compete in the Olympics. Now, before I make my case, I'd like to give the audience a better understanding of what I'm about to argue, and I'll waste no time in doing so. According to the Merriam-Webster dictionary, a transgender can be defined as a person who currently differs from the sex that they were identified as having at birth. Now, what the moot is saying is that these people who have had a transition from their assigned gender at birth should not be allowed to compete in the Olympics, and I cannot help but be in total agreement with this stance. See, my opponent, the unfortunate reality is that we exist in a world that embraces political correctness, so much so that we often steer cold, hard facts straight in the face and deliberately ignore them in fear that we may be ostracized for discrimination. My opponent, let me make this blatantly clear. I refuse to be bullied by this toxic left-wing culture of denial and cancellation that has currently engulfed our society. We must draw the line somewhere, and surely you'd think that the line would be drawn where competitive sports comes in. We cannot allow biological men to compete with women in sports simply because they woke up one day and decided to shop for dresses on Amazon. This is a gross injustice to actual women who train very hard to be good at their respective sports, and a disgrace to the sports in general. Let me expound. The IOC has created a mandate which states that transgender women who wish to compete must maintain a blood testosterone level of less than 5 nanomoles per liter of blood for a minimum of 12 months continuously before being declared eligible to compete. Now, to put it simply, the IOC is telling these trans women athletes to undergo some form of hormone replacement therapy to lessen the testosterone levels in their blood before they can compete with actual women. Now, I'm assuming that this rule, much like the rule for intersex athletes, was supposedly intended to create a level playing field for all female athletes. But after observing the recent performances by trans athletes, I must say this playing field seems much more like a very steep hill. My opponent, I'm sure that by now you would have heard of U.S. collegiate swimmer Leah Thomas, who has catapulted his way to stardom after being pretty much in the wilderness of men's collegiate swimming, ranking outside of the top 400 to not only ranking number 1 as a woman, but also beating Olympic medalist Emma Wyatt, and shattering records while he's at it. Now, bearing in mind that the IOC states that trans women athletes should maintain a blood testosterone level of less than 5 nanomoles per liter of blood continuously for at least 12 months before being declared eligible to compete. Ladies and gentlemen, I think you'll find it very interesting that Leah Thomas has done 2 whole years of hormone therapy. 24 months, twice as long as the IAAF demands, and has still managed to completely destroy his female competitors in the pool. I'm struggling to see how you would deem this fair, my opponent. Now, what this means is, if Leah Thomas wants to compete in the Olympics, he would be more than qualified under the current IAAF rules, or the IOC rules. Now, my opponent, I'm sure that you don't need me to reiterate how absurdly deluded this grotesquely unfair rule is to the integrity of women's sports. All the hard work, all the effort, all the progress that these female athletes have put into becoming top swimmers has been thwarted by a man who appears to be conflicted with his own gender identity. Sadly, this isn't even the only case of trans women athletes outperforming actual women in sports. Another example of this absolute disgrace is with 44-year-old New Zealand weightlifter Laurel Hubbard, who has been absolutely dominating weightlifting even after making his transition way back in 2012, winning gold at 3 separate championships in women's weightlifting before qualifying for the Tokyo Olympics in 2020. It's an even scarier case with MMA fighter Tamika Brents, who suffered a concussion and a broken skull during her match with a transgender fighter who goes by the name of Fallon Fox. My audience, judges, this is an example of how stupidly dangerous it is to allow biological men to compete with women in sports. My opponent, where do we draw the line exactly? Sustained. Okay. If it is still unclear to you how unfair this rule is, let me attempt to make my argument a bit more lucid. See, my opponent, we cannot base the criteria of fairness on 12 months of hormone therapy. The reality is, males and females have completely different physiologies, and 12 months of hormone therapy simply cannot reverse what puberty has done to the male body over a prolonged period. Quite literally, we're just built different, and those transgender athletes mentioned earlier are prime examples of this. Let me support my claim. There was a study conducted, and the point of this research was basically to increase knowledge about sex hormones and explore the consequences of changing these hormonal landscapes during adulthood. The research looked at the effects it had on skeletal muscles, the heart, and blood vessels, and other systems that affected athletic performances. Now, in line with what most people would have probably already guessed, transgender men saw a massive increase in strength after undergoing testosterone therapy for a year. But what will surprise most people, I'm sure, is that transgender women who are basically men who transitioned to women, who went through hormone therapy for the same period, saw a far less pronounced reduction in muscle mass than many would have guessed, losing only 5% of lean muscle mass. Apart from the fact that lean muscle mass only experienced a 5% decrease in this 12-month span. Factors like heart size, lung capacity, bone density, and general size or height are not altered by a reduction in testosterone at all. And these are all biological advantages that men tend to have over their female counterparts. The assumption that testosterone suppression in transgender women removes the male performance advantage, thus delivering a fair and safe competition, is preposterous, and the IAAF needs to consider this evidence before allowing themselves to be bullied by left-winged hooligans who refuse to read a biology book. It is ludicrous to suggest that a man who has been a man for 20 to 30 years can suddenly start taking estrogen for 12 months and be allowed to compete against biological women. This is plain unfair, ridiculous, and dangerous. Let me put it into perspective how comically stupid it is to allow transgender women to compete in the Olympics, especially in combat sports. See, judging by the logic of the IOC, current heavyweight champion Tyson Fury, who stands at 6 feet 9 inches tall and weighs 277 pounds, and would be eligible to step into an Olympic ring and face a biological female. My opponent, as a human being with real emotions, would you allow your daughter to step into a boxing ring with this literal giant? Now, I'll be honest, even as a man, my soul would literally leave my body at the sound of the first bell. This is the type of matchup that the IOC and my opponent would have millions of viewers in front of their TVs witnessing. My opponent, imagine if your daughter was training for years to make an Olympic swim team, and she makes it, and in her first Olympics, she made a final, but just fell one place short of the podium because Michael Phelps came back from retirement and decided that he wanted to be the greatest of all time in the male and female categories of swimming. My opponent, realistic or not, these are all possibilities under the current IOC rules. Please do not be naive. The undeniable proof is right before your very eyes. And as a future ambassador of sports that was trained by the GC Foster College of Physical Education and Sports, I dare you to agree with this nonsensical rule that the IOC has imposed. Women's sports categories is for, as the name suggests, women. And I think allowing biological men to compete in these categories is a slap in the face of every single female athlete who has been denied a medal or a spot on an Olympic team. A literal slap in the face of all the females who have had to share a ring with one of these men. And an absolute outright disgrace to women's sports globally. I rest my case.
Such riveting speech. We will now hear from our opposition, Mr. Salmon.
Mic check, mic check. Esteemed judges, Madam Speaker, worthy opponent, and members of the audience, good evening. The move put before the House, transgender athletes should not be allowed to compete in the Olympics. But let me first address a few things that my opponent pointed out. My opponent, I must inform you that to think this is a new topic is very misleading. People think that there is no data dating from decades ago to show that trans athletes have been competing long ago in the Olympic Games. Let me also inform you, when hormone therapy and puberty blockers are applied, in many cases, estrogen inducement is largely present, and sex characteristics of a female becomes present. You are worried about testosterone, but there is actually no clear link between performance and testosterone levels. If testosterone is higher, this does not mean an athlete perform better. What does it mean to be a transgender? Merriam-Webster's dictionary defines the term transgender as relating to or being a person whose gender identity differs from the sex the person had or was identified at birth. Consider putting yourself in the shoes of a transgender athlete. You finally have the chance to compete in a sport you have spent months practicing for, only to be told you can't because it is not fair. I firmly agree that transgender athletes should be permitted to compete in the Olympic Games. Let it be made clear, members of the audience, participation in any sport is a human right, and sports should be a welcoming space that provides empowering experiences for all. The International Olympic Committee Athletes' Right and Declaration states that all athletes should be allowed to practice sport and compete without being subjected to discrimination based upon race, color, religion, age, sex, sexual orientation, disability, language, political, national, social origin, property, birth, or other immutable status. And yes, my opponent could argue that this same document speaks to an athlete's responsibility to not manipulate sporting competitions. But my opponent, that contradiction is down to the IOC to be rectified, and not the transgender athlete themselves, whom some of these very same rights already protect. Crazy. Madam Speaker, this discussion about trans athletes' involvement in sports typically pits fairness against inclusion, as if the two are diametrically opposed, which is not the case. Inclusion is required for fairness. It is a fundamental requirement of fairness to be totally inclusive and to not discriminate. So, when organizations that my opponent is in support of, such as local schools in some American states, that saw the need to legally have trans athletes banned from participating in sports by activating an anti-transgender legislation, I see this as an act of unfairness. They are sending the wrong message. It tells them they don't deserve to socialize with those who share the same interests. Most importantly, it goes out of its way to deprive them of the opportunity to feel normal, to feel like any other person. It says also that who they are isn't accepted or acceptable, which is a catalyst for discrimination. Audience, what they should be advocating for, rather than adding to the further discard down the road, is exactly what the IOC has recommended. These 2003-2004 recommendations called for the inclusion of male-female, in other words MF, and female-male, in other words FM, athletes as long as they met explicit criteria such as gonadectomy and completion of anatomic changes consistent with their professed gender, followed by a 2-year period, which he spoke about, in which they receive hormonal therapy that is appropriate for their assigned sex category and in a verifiable manner. Trans athletes would also have to show that legal recognition of their new gender is identified as being obtained in the appropriate jurisdiction, my opponent. My opponent, if you are still convinced that the inclusion of trans athletes in the Olympics is unfair, then give me a valid reason why, since the Tokyo Olympics in 2021, we have seen transsexual athletes being legally permitted to openly compete in the Olympic Games. Why? These athletes include the likes of For Quinn, Laurel Hubbard, Chelsea Wolfe. Quinn, who is a female footballer, tweeted on her opening game how proud she felt in seeing her name in the starting lineup and on her accreditation. She further expressed sadness in knowing that the struggles past Olympians faced, being unable to live their truth because of the world we live in. Quinn also said that the fight is far from over, and she will only celebrate when herself and all trans athletes are sharing a spot around the table with athletes of other sexes. Please note, members of the audience, that Canada drew that opening game in which Quinn tweeted about 1-1. Quinn also represented Canada in Rio Olympics, where they only got bronze. The possibility for more athletes to participate at the Tokyo Games was likely, as Nikki Hiltz did not qualify in the women's 1500 meter at the American track and field trials. Neither did volleyballer Tiffany Aubrey make the Brazilian final Olympic roster. There is also a story of Chris Moiser, a triathlete and activist who came out as a transgender in 2010, went to compete at Tokyo and had to withdraw from the men's 50K walk race because of injury. I mention these cases, my audience, to highlight the research of Jock Turban, which states that there is no epidemic of transgender females dominating women's sport. I repeat, none. The mixed 4x4 is a newly introduced event in the Olympic Games, where a team of 2 women and 2 men is assembled. The rule allows for the possibility of 1 or more males to be running against other females on the same leg. How can this be seen as fair, but not viewed similarly or harsher than a trans woman who take testosterone suppressants for 2 years, gone through gonadectomy, then to see the personal best they would have had as a male is not what they have now, that they are a female competing against women who originally were born as women. This is madness, Madam Speaker. My audience, the focus mainly surrounds trans female rather than trans male, since some people, and my opponent alike, have driven claims, which I am about to rubbish, that transgender women have higher testosterone levels. I have earlier mentioned trans women taking testosterone suppressants. But there is the belief that testosterone induces physical changes, such as an increase in muscular mass gives transgender girls an unfair edge. However, transsexual females are not the only ones that have high testosterone levels. Polycystic ovarian syndrome, which causes high testosterone levels, affects an estimated 10% of women. They are not prohibited from participating in women's sports. Wow, wow. My opponent, are you insisting that trans women will maintain advantages? Let me ask you, are those advantages large enough to preclude meaningful competition? This is still not clear, up to date. Think about it. The advantages you argue trans women may have may also come with disadvantages. The knowledge I've garnered here at GC Foster has led me to the point that bigger bodies of trans women are now being powered by reduced muscle mass, reduced aerobic capacity that can lead to disadvantages in things like quickness, recovery, endurance, and strength. According to the 2015 US Transgender Survey report, 17% of transsexuals who were viewed as transgender in school were bullied to the point of dropping out. Another 6% were expelled from school. This is indicating, members of the audience, that the notion that being transgender gives trans athletes an advantage ignores the reality of their lives. I will end by restating that there is little or no scientific research regarding the performance of elite trans athletes. Even until then, the focus should be that trans athletes must be allowed to participate in the Olympics. I thank you.
We would like to thank both speakers for together their stand so eloquently and coming up here to deliver passionately. Now we'll give them about 4 minutes to deliver their rebuttal. And while they're doing so, Mr. Gale, can you just play some music in the interlude? All right, gentlemen, now it's time for you to deliver your rebuttal. You each get 4 minutes for delivery. Mr. Watson, you're up.
My opponent, I'd like to touch on some of the points that you have presented. The fact that trans athletes have been participating in the Olympics does not, from long time, from a while back, does not mean that this rule is fair. The rules have been changed so many times because of inconsistencies. So why should it not be considered now? I am all for inclusion, my opponent. Do not get me wrong, but I am not for inclusion when it robs a female of a possible life-changing opportunity. Do you think that these trans athletes are not aware of their advantage? There is no evidence of a transgender epidemic in the sports world when it has been made international news. Laurel Hubbard, the two transgender teens who have been dominating state championships, Kina McKinnon and Fallon Fox. The athletes are the majority. The athletes, transgender athletes, are the minority. So you cannot argue that there is not an epidemic because of the sheer numbers. Another point that you made, a relay is a team sport, so there's technically no advantage since it focuses more on strategy rather than actual speed. The intersex athletes who have been allowed to, who have been banned for competing, their high levels of testosterone is natural. The trans athletes have altered their natural testosterone levels, who have altered their natural physical capabilities. My opponent, why on earth do you think these biological men are dominating and, in my opinion, intentionally destroying women's sports? How do we know it's not for money or fame? See, the IOC is so hell-bent on remaining as politically correct as possible. They are blatantly ignoring basic biological fact. The fact is, men are physically superior to women, and that is exactly why sports categories have been segregated. My question to you is, my opponent, how do we stop bottom-ranked male athletes from making the transition to female just to dominate biological females to get a quick and easy payday? How do we stop very large men from the bottom of the heavyweight division in the boxing ranks from transitioning to females and possibly seriously injuring somebody's daughter mid-fight and collecting millions for it? How would you feel to leave GC Foster and enter coaching? And you're training a female athlete with serious potential to be the best in her category, but will never be the best because a biological man is being allowed to compete with her. Are you understanding the corruption and possible dangers that are a very real possibility under the current IOC rules, my opponent? How would you feel if a trans woman athlete denied your daughter a place on the Olympic team? How do we know that these men are not just transitioning to female, knowing that they have the genetic advantage to live a lifestyle that they would not be able to live if they continued competing as males? Ladies and gentlemen, what we are doing when we allow biological men to compete in female categories in sports is firstly putting biological females in serious danger, robbing them of opportunities and dooming them to compete for the rest of their careers in a category that they will never be able to be the top of, no matter how hard they train. This is an injustice, this is unfair, and it is an absolute disgrace to sports globally. I rest my case.
I will now invite Mr. Salmon to bring his rebuttal.
My opponent, these rules you mentioned that are ever-changing, they are ever-changing to facilitate these trans athletes. I hope you're aware of that. How do we stop the bottom-rank athletes from dominating women's sports? Now, do we remember Caster Semenya? This is proof to support my argument once again. Caster Semenya, who is actually an hermaphrodite, so she has both sexual organs. She was forced to take testosterone-induced drugs. And what happened after a duration on these drugs? Accepted.
How do you know Caster Semenya is a hermaphrodite when there has been social news reports stating
Caster Semenya herself stated that she has both sexual organs. Many reports, tests done on her, indicate that she's actually a hermaphrodite. Now, back to my argument. Point I'm trying to make is that Caster Semenya has been on testosterone-induced drugs for a duration of time. And we have seen what happened to her 800-meter times. She tried the 1,500, and she has not been able to even compete with women. So that's something to take into consideration. Dr. Joshua Safer, Executive Director of the Mount Sinai Center for Transgender Medicine and Surgery, highlighted that a person's genetic makeup and internal and external reproductive anatomy are not useful indicators of athletic performance. For a trans woman athlete who meets NCAA standards, there is no inherent reason why her psychological characteristics related to athletic performance should be treated differently from the psychological characteristics of a non-transgender woman. There is also the myth that transgender woman inclusion in the Olympics will hurt cisgender women. But in truth, this hurts all women. But this matter isn't really about who is better or who is not my opponent. It is more about excluding transgender people from another public space. No, it's a sporting arena after all. There should not be any reason for a debate or struggle on ways in which to integrate trans athletes into the Olympic participation, especially with the recommendations laid out by the IOC. Issues of basic fairness and equity demand an expansion of our thinking about equal opportunity in sports. Open up your eyes and smell the coffee. Including transgender athletes in the Olympic has so many benefits, and they know this. It can end up promoting values of inclusivity within athletics. Banning transgender athletes from the Olympics undermines inclusivity and compromises the wide-ranging benefits that all athletes get from sports. Discrimination against transgender athletes would see the IOC missing out on the opportunity to add to the already many benefits it is seeing. As the LGBTQA+, America's estimated $1 trillion in spending power according to marketing strategist Bob Wittig. Since Citi launched its true name card, they have benefited largely, as featured trans influencer Nikita Drangun drove more than 600,000 in online sales at Sephora, according to its SVP marketing, Jennifer Whipple. This is just an indication, my opponent, of the financial backing and marketing that can come from the inclusion of trans athletes in the Olympic Games. This is not to say let them buy out the Olympics, but it's an indication of the many positive that lies. So while the matter may seem currently as another minority-majority case, let's focus on the positives, because even if transgender athletes retain some competitive advantages, it does not necessarily mean that the advantages are unfair, because all top athletes possess some edge over their peers. The positive signs are now being seen as people are waking up, as a research and medical physicist, Joan Harper, revealed that of the estimated 200,000 athletes competing in the NCAA, 50 of them are estimated to be transgender athletes. My opponent, I ask you to consider, I ask you to sit and think, are we really willing to discriminate against another human being? I rest my case.
Man, I know you can do better than that. They come this far, you can do better. At this time, I would like to invite Mr. Williams, our VP of Academics, to come and just bring his remarks.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. Come on, good afternoon, everyone. Let me tell you something. It is not very often that I am at a loss for words. My heart is extremely full, elated, overjoyed for two reasons. One, so you know how very passionate I am about my male students. And I'm not a sexist, so let's get that right. But to see two young men, clap them, two young men who have grasped an opportunity to come and enter a debate of this nature, the great debate series, and have done extremely well, in my opinion. I do not believe we can have a winner and a loser this afternoon. I think they are both winners. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to congratulate the organizers, Mrs. Donald, Mrs. Dobson, who are the chief instigators, and the quality work that they have put in to expose you as students to this, what I call capacity building, this development. The academic office feels proud of my lecturers. Congratulations, ladies. When we came here and we had the launch 8 weeks ago, I asked myself, are these ladies crazy? But in a jiffy, 8 weeks gone through the window, and we're at the finals today. But I'm going to lay down a charge to them. And I'm going to say to them that moving forward, I want this debate to take on a new feel. I want it to move from an individual space to at least a house basis. Because students, this is all to your benefit. A first-year student against a third-year student. And by the way, Karen, you're in third year, right? Good, not fourth year. So let's make that correction. And I'm so proud of the fact that a group man is able to come to the party and delivered himself against a senior student. I'm so proud of both of them. I have is that too many of us, staff, students, are missing out on this event. And so, ladies, as you plan next season, as you plan in the future, we must find a way to make this event a calendar year, a calendar event, where every year at this time, we organize the great debate series. Because, as I said before, my students will only grow from this experience. The only disappointment I have this evening with my two finalists is that one supports Manchester City, the other supports Chelsea, but and I'm so happy they are sitting in front of red tablecloths. So they are coming on board. And if they come on board, they will learn they'll never be alone. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you. I want to thank you for supporting them. I want to thank the Language and Debating Society. I want to thank everyone who has participated, because these are not the only two persons, you know. So the others who participated in this series, I want to thank you. I want to thank the staff members who have come out and have supported this event. And again, let me say this. We are going to make this bigger and better. And some of us are missing out on the prizes, Mr. Williams, because the prizes are also very attractive. So congratulations to the team. Well done, everyone. Thank you very much. My bad. Sorry. And the next thing that I must speak about the next thing that I must speak about is how inclusive this organization, this arrangement has brought, because we see a support staff, Ms. Moore, who's playing a significant role in what we do. Sometimes we think it's only lecturers or academic persons can come up here and deliver. Thank you very much, Ms. Moore. And Chris, I don't know what we're going to do with you with respect to what you are bringing to the table in terms of how we promote our events. Congratulations, man. Well done.
At this time, we will be having an item by Candy Thomas.
Yes, our skin become blessing. Justice is juxtaposition enough. Justice for all, just ain't specific enough. One son died, the spirit in us. True and living in us. Resistance is us. That's why I rose the saddle. We walk through Ferguson. Men go down, woman and man up. They one day.
And now we would like to invite Mr. Angus to present our participators with a certificate. So over the past 8 weeks of this competition, we've had quite a number of participants. These have included Zain Hidram, Miss Colleen Young, Janoy McIntosh, Natania Rodney, Danica Rumble,
At your command. Let's rumble. It's a pleasure. On behalf of the Faith and Society, representing this.
Adrian Knight,
Tonight, it's a pleasure on behalf of the Faith Society to present you with this. Please face the camera. Yes, sir.
Candy Thomas,
The dancer. Debater and dancer, it's a privilege on behalf of the Faith Society to present you with this. Thank you, sir.
Javon Campbell,
On behalf of the society, sir, it's a pleasure.
Mr. Zane Watson,
Big man. Enough respect here, sir. Thank you. Enough respect.
and Mr. Karan Samon.
Congratulations, sir. On behalf of the Faith Society, it's a pleasure.
All right, so some of our participants are not here today, but I would still like to call their name as they participated in our debate. These include Giovanni Parkins, Javari Lamard, Safari Thompson, Royale Gordon, Chevelle Taylor, and Alexia Smith. Now I would like to invite Mrs. Donald to come and give a special certificate.
Good evening, everyone. Now, we have some special awards to hand out this evening. And the first one is for the most spirited debater, and that award goes to Danica Rumble. Please step forward, Sonia. Hold on. That way, turn it to the camera. The second prize goes to Colleen Campbell for most improved debater. Please step forward, Colleen. I'm going to ask all participants to step forward. We have two small tokens for all of you. Apart from the finalists and the top four, that's John Noah and Natania, you're excluded from this part, but yours will come very soon. We have two more awards. Zane, can you step forward, please? Zane has been our social media publicist and he has really provided us with much needed technical support. Last but not least, Mr. Gale, can you please step forward? We want to award you this small token for your support. I'd like to invite Mr. Williams. We will now be handing out awards for third and fourth place winners. In fourth place, we have Nathaniel Rodney. Please step forward for me, please.
Another prize for you. One more?
In third place, we have Janoy McIntosh. Please step forward. He has won the prize of dinner or lunch for two, valued at $10,000 at Bold's Tracks and Record Restaurant.
Oh, come on.
Before I announce this last part, let us all give each participant a big round of applause. So, our second place goes to Mr. Caron Salmon.
Come on. Picture moment, please.
Then,
Wait. Come on. Congratulations.
Mr. Salmon has won a day pass for two at the Rio Hotel, Ocho Rios. Champion is none other than Zane Watson. Watson has won a pass for two at Mystic Mountain, inclusive of all rides and lunch.
My apologies. We have a trophy for the most improved debater that we should have given to Colleen Young. My apologies. Please.
Congratulations, Colleen. Make you would have grown from. All right.
Such brilliant performances and speeches this afternoon. On behalf of the entire language department team, I wish to say a hearty thank you to all members of staff who played a role in making this competition a success. Some who joined us even on the last hour, last minute to give support. We really appreciate your help. To our chairperson, thank you. Miss Moore joined us, was one staff member who joined us on the last hour. And we can say, I'm sure you'll agree, she did an excellent job. Special thanks to our sponsors for the contribution, the invaluable contribution that you have made. To our tech team, Mr. Andre Gale and Mr. Zane Hedrum, thank you. Participants, students, you made a grand showcase of excellence throughout the competition and this afternoon. Continue to shine your light on the path of success. Lastly, thanks to all in our audience, both online and here with us, for your sterling support each week. To everyone here and online, we look forward to your presence, your support for the 2023 Great Debaters Competition.
We'd like a group photo. All the participants, please step forward.